Everyone in the palace knew the warning. Never enter the sealed throne room after dusk. Never speak the sleeping king's name too loudly. And above all, never touch the black crown resting on his head. They said the crown was cursed. They said one careless hand could wake the old darkness and bring the kingdom to its knees. But the night Mara Vey was sent there as punishment, she had already lost everything a girl could lose in public. Her fiancé had rejected her in front of the court. The ladies had laughed behind their fans. The nobles had looked at her like a stain on marble. So when the crown began to slip from the sleeping king's brow, Mara did the one thing every person in Ravengard had sworn never to do. She reached out and caught it. The moment her fingers brushed the cold metal, the torches blew blue. The throne cracked beneath the king's hands, and the man who had slept for 20 years opened his eyes. He did not roar. He did not command. He clutched Mara's wrist like a drowning man and whispered, "Please, do not leave me. And if you think the court hated her when she was useless, wait until you hear what they did when they realized the entire kingdom now needed her alive." Before we step into the sealed room, take a second to subscribe if you love emotional fantasy stories where the person everyone throws away becomes the one no one can replace. And tell me in the comments early, if you were Mara, would you trust a cursed king who begged you to stay? Or would you run while you still could? Mara Vey had not been born for court. She had been born in a village where bread was counted by slices, where winter came through the walls, and where girls learned early that kindness could be mistaken for weakness. Her mother had served as a seamstress for House Vale, and when Mara was 12, Lord Edmund Vale took her into his household as a ward after her mother died. The story told at court was generous. The great lord had rescued a poor orphan. The truth was less pretty. Mara became useful. She could read letters for the old lord when his eyes failed. She could balance accounts that his sons ignored. She could remember which tenants had lost crops and which widows needed time. By 17, she knew more about House Vale's estates than the young heir who was supposed to inherit them. That heir was Julian Vale, handsome, polished, and weak in all the ways that never show in portraits. For years, Julian smiled at Mara in corridors and called her his promised bride when no one important could hear. The old lord had written a betrothal contract, partly out of affection, partly because Mara's quiet competence had saved the family more than once. Mara never mistook it for a fairy tale, but she allowed herself one small hope. Not for romance, exactly. For a place, a name, a room where she could close the door and not be reminded she had been taken in like furniture. Then Lord Edmund died, and Julian discovered ambition. The royal court had gathered for the winter petitioning season, a month of banquets, taxes, alliances, and whispers beneath painted ceilings. Mara arrived in a blue gown she had altered herself, with her mother's silver pin at her throat. She knew people would stare. She knew they would ask why a ward with no bloodline stood beside a noble heir. But Julian had promised to announce the betrothal after the council dinner. He had squeezed her hand that morning and said, "After tonight, no one will be able to send you away." It was the last kind sentence he gave her before choosing the easier life. The rejection happened under the white chandeliers of the lesser court, where musicians played softly and servants carried sugared plums on silver trays. Councillor Soren Dreg, the king's chief regent, had just welcomed Lady Selene Arkwright, whose father controlled the Western mines. Julian stepped forward, pale but smiling, and announced his intention to marry Lady Selene by spring. For one breath, Mara thought she had misheard him. Then Selene lifted her gloved hand, showing the veil signet ring already fitted to her finger. The same ring Julian had once said would be Mara's. Someone laughed. Not loudly. That would have been vulgar. It was worse than loud. It was a soft, elegant sound that spread from mouth to mouth like perfume. Mara stood still, because moving would prove she had been wounded. Julian did not look at her until Councillor Dreg said, with a pleasant cruelty sharpened by practice, "And the ward? Was there not some childish arrangement?" Julian's eyes flickered toward Mara. In them she saw apology, fear, and calculation. Calculation won. He said, "There was never a lawful betrothal. Mara misunderstood my father's charity. That was all. Years of ledgers, promises, winter evenings, and patient hope became a misunderstanding." Mara felt the heat rise in her face, but she did not cry. That seemed to irritate them more. Lady Selene looked her over and said that perhaps the palace laundries could use another pair of hands. Councillor Dreg smiled. Not the laundries. A girl who imagines herself noble should learn the weight of old things. Send her to the sealed throne room. It has gathered dust long enough. The music faltered. Even the servants looked up. The sealed throne room was not cleaned. It was guarded, prayed over, and avoided. Behind its bronze doors, King Alaric of Ravengard had slept for 20 years beneath a crown no living hand dared touch. Mara had heard the stories like everyone else. Alaric had been young when the border wars ended. Brilliant, beloved, too stubborn to be guided by men twice his age. Then the curse had come on the night of his coronation feast. Black veins had climbed his throat. The crown had darkened. The king had collapsed on the throne and never woken. Since then, the council ruled in his name. They said they preserved the kingdom. They said the crown kept the curse contained. They said touching it would release whatever had taken him. And now Mara was being sent there because the court wanted her frightened. She should have begged. She should have lowered herself before Julian and thanked him for not casting her into the street. Instead, she curtsied to the room that had just erased her and said, "If old things must be cleaned, my Lord Councillor, I will begin with the dust that has been allowed to settle longest." A few servants hid smiles. Councillor Dreg did not. That was how Mara found herself walking down the western gallery at midnight with a bucket, a rag, and 2 guards who refused to cross the final threshold. The palace changed near the sealed room. The music faded. The air cooled. The tapestries showed hunts, battles, and a young king with bright eyes lifting a child onto his horse during a festival parade. Mara paused at that image longer than she meant to. This was not a monster in the weaving. This was a man caught mid-laugh, alive in colored thread while his body slept behind bronze. The guards unlocked 3 chains and 1 charm-ringed latch. One of them, an older soldier with a scar through his eyebrow, would not meet her eyes. "Do not go near the throne," he muttered. "Sweep the edges. Wipe the windows if you can reach them. But do not touch the crown. Not if it falls. Not if it burns. Not if you hear him speak." "Has he spoken before?" Mara asked. The guard swallowed. "No. But this palace teaches a man to fear even what has not happened yet." Then they shut the doors behind her. The sound rolled through the chamber like thunder. Mara stood alone with the sleeping king. The throne room was vast enough to hold a winter market. Moonlight poured through high windows, silvering the dust. The banners were faded, but not ruined. Someone had been maintaining them from a distance, replacing what rotted, preserving the image while avoiding the truth at the center. King Alaric sat on the black throne, his body held upright by old magic and older grief. He did not look dead. That made it worse. His dark hair fell to his shoulders. His hands rested on the arms of the throne. Fine lines marked his face, not from age, but from pain held too long. Beneath his skin, faint black threads pulsed at his wrists and neck, and on his head sat the crown. It was not gold. It had been once, perhaps. Now it was a deep, tarnished metal that drank the moonlight. 7 points rose from it like frozen flames. At the center, a dark stone beat softly, almost like a heart. Mara hated that she felt pity. Pity was dangerous in palaces. It made you step closer when wisdom told you to back away. She forced herself to begin at the far wall. She swept dust into piles. She wiped the lower panels. She scrubbed old wax from the floor. The work steadied her. Anger had kept her upright in the court, but work gave her somewhere to put it. With every stroke of the rag, she remembered Julian's voice, saying she had misunderstood. She remembered Celine's ring. She remembered everyone waiting for her to break. "I will not break for their entertainment," she said into the empty room. Her words traveled farther than expected. They reached the throne and seemed to come back changed. The crown's center stone gave a dull pulse. Mara froze. Nothing else happened. She laughed once, softly, at her own nerves, and returned to cleaning. But as she moved closer to the dais, she noticed something wrong. The crown was tilted. Not much. Just enough that one sharp point rested against the king's temple. A thin line of darkness had begun to creep from that place down his cheek. Mara told herself it was not her concern. She told herself the entire kingdom had survived 20 years without her opinion. She told herself that if the crown fell, men like Dreg would blame her, whether she touched it or not. Then the king's fingers twitched. The sound Mara made was barely a breath. She took one step back. The crown shifted again. This time it slid visibly, slowly, inevitably, toward the edge of his brow. Mara imagined it hitting the floor. She imagined the curse spilling through the palace like smoke. She imagined the guards opening the doors to find her standing over disaster. And beneath all that fear, she saw not a cursed object, but a sleepa man's head about to be cut by metal. Her body moved before her pride could stop it. She climbed the dais, dropped the rag, and caught the crown with both hands. Cold shot through her palms. Not winter cold, grave cold, starless cold, the kind that remembers every lonely room you have ever stood in. Mara tried to let go, but the crown held her skin as if recognizing it. The dark stone flared white. Every torch in the chamber burst into blue flame. The windows trembled. The sleeping king gasped. Mara stumbled, but a hand closed around her wrist. King Alaric opened his eyes. They were not black, as the stories claimed. They were gray, clear, and terrified. The eyes of a man waking from a nightmare that had lasted longer than Mara had been alive. His grip tightened, not cruelly, but desperately. The black threads under his skin surged, then retreated from where her fingers still touched the crown. He stared at her as if she were a door in a burning room. Stay, he whispered. His voice cracked from 20 years of silence. Please, do not leave. Mara should have screamed. She should have pulled free and run. Instead, she saw the panic in his face, raw and human, and whispered back, Your Majesty? Pain crossed his features. The black veins climbed his throat when her hand shifted, then faded when she steadied the crown. He understood at the same time she did. Whatever had woken him was not finished. Whatever held the curse back was passing through her. The throne room doors flew open. Guards rushed in, then stopped as if they had reached the edge of a cliff. Behind them came Counselor Dreg in a night robe lined with fur, his silver hair unbound, his face stripped for one instant of all courtly calm. He looked not amazed, not joyful, afraid. That was the first thing Mara noticed, and she would remember it later. The king's eyes moved to Dreg. Recognition came slowly, then sharpened. Soren, Alaric said. The counselor lowered himself to one knee with perfect speed. Your Majesty, the gods have returned you to us. The words were beautiful. The room did not believe them. King Alaric tried to rise. The curse answered. Black lines shot down his arms, and he nearly collapsed. Mara caught his shoulder without thinking. The moment she touched him, the darkness withdrew again. Every person in the room saw it. Every person understood enough to become dangerous. Counselor Dreg's gaze settled on Mara's hand, with the hunger of a man discovering a key. If you're still watching, this is the moment where Mara's punishment turns into a prison. Hit the like button if you can already feel that the most dangerous people in this palace are not the cursed king, but the smiling nobles who suddenly need the girl they humiliated. By dawn, Mara was no longer a discarded ward. She was a royal necessity, which, she quickly learned, was only another kind of captivity. They did not put her in chains. Chains would have been honest. Instead, they gave her a chamber beside the king's recovery rooms, 2 ladies to dress her, 4 guards at the door, and a physician who checked her pulse as though she were a candle that might go out. The council gathered in the king's antechamber, while Mara sat on a stool near Alaric's bed, her fingers wrapped around the edge of the crown where it rested on a velvet stand between them. When she moved too far, the black threads returned to his skin. When she came near, they faded. The physician, Master Ivan, was an old man with tired eyes and ink stains on his sleeves. He tested distances with string, chalk, and a gentleness Mara appreciated. 10 paces is safe, he murmured. 12 is strain. 15 causes pain. Beyond 20, I fear His Majesty may fall back under. Then she remains within 10, Counselor Dreg said. Not asked. Said. Mara looked up. For how long? The counselor gave her the same smile he had worn while destroying her future. Until the kingdom is secure. That is not a length of time. It is the only answer loyal subjects require. King Alaric, propped against pillows, turned his head. He was weak, but not absent. She is not a tool, Soren. The room stilled. It was the first royal command spoken in 20 years without passing through the council. Dreg bowed. Of course not, Majesty. The girl is honored beyond measure. But you have slept while borders shifted, harvests failed, and old enemies watched our gates. Your life is the kingdom's life. If her presence preserves you, then her comfort must bend to necessity. Mara felt every noble eye on her. Yesterday, her comfort had meant nothing because she was insignificant. Today, it meant nothing because she was important. The shape changed. The dismissal remained. Alaric's jaw tightened. Her name. Dreg blinked. Majesty. You called her the girl. Her name. Mara answered before the counselor could pretend ignorance. Mara Vey. The king repeated it as if setting it into law. Mara Vey will not be handled without consent. Dreg's bow deepened, hiding his expression. As your majesty commands. But commands spoken by a king who could not stand without a servant's hand were fragile things. The council understood that. Mara did too. Her first days beside Alaric were made of strange intimacies and sharper humiliations. She sat near him while ministers reported on 20 years of decisions made in his name. She walked with him down private corridors while his legs trembled from disuse. She slept in a chair outside his chamber, because whenever she returned to her own room, bells rang and physicians rushed in to stop the curse from blooming across his chest. Through it all, the court adjusted itself around her like silk tightening into a noose. Ladies who had laughed now sent fruit. Lords who had ignored her now bowed too deeply. Servants whispered that she had bewitched the king. Priests argued over whether she was blessed, cursed, or both. Julian Vale arrived on the third morning with flowers. Mara was in the small sunroom, 10 paces from Alaric, mending a torn glove because her hands needed occupation. The king pretended to read reports, but watched over the page. Julian entered dressed in mourning colors, as if grieving the mistake he had personally chosen. Mara, he said softly, may I speak with you? She did not stand. That alone felt like rebellion. You are speaking. He glanced at Alaric, then lowered his voice in a way meant to create privacy where none existed. What happened at court was complicated. Celine's family pressured me. Dreg pressured everyone. You know how these things are. But now your position has changed. Mine can change too. Mara stared at him. For one foolish second, she waited for an apology. Not because she wanted him back, but because a part of her still needed proof that she had not imagined the cruelty. Julian offered none. He only placed the flowers beside her chair. The betrothal contract may still be found. My father was never careless with papers. If we present it properly, you could return to House Vale as my intended. With royal favor, of course. Alaric's page stopped turning. Mara felt heat rise in her face, but this time it was not shame. Yesterday, I misunderstood charity. Today, I am royal favor. Julian winced. Do not make this ugly. You did that without my help. His charm thinned. Think carefully. The palace may praise you now, but you are still alone. The king needs you. The council will use you. I can give you a name again. Mara looked at the flowers, then at the man who had taught her the difference between being wanted and being useful. She picked up the bouquet and handed it back. Keep your name. It seems to fit you poorly enough already. Julian left with a red face. Alaric waited until the door closed. Did you love him? The question was quiet, without claim. Mara considered lying. Court had trained her to hide anything tender. But Alaric had woken with fear in his throat, and no armor except a crown that hurt him. I loved the life I thought he meant, she said. That is not always the same as loving the person. Alaric looked down at his hands. No, it is not. That was the first honest conversation between them. More followed, often in fragments. Alaric told her he remembered pieces of the night he fell. A feast. Music. A bitter taste in wine he had not finished. Soren Drag arguing with him about dissolving the Emergency War Council. Lady Isolde, the treasurer, warning that nobles would panic if stripped of power too quickly. Then pain. Then darkness, with voices moving around him like people speaking above water. Mara told him about House Vale, about learning accounts by candlelight, about being praised for usefulness and punished for wanting dignity. She did not tell him everything. He did not ask for more than she offered. That restraint did more to earn her trust than any vow. Still, trust wasn't safety. The council's plans grew around her. They proposed a sacred proximity oath, binding Mara magically to remain within reach of the king. They proposed moving her bed into an adjoining chamber with no outer door. They proposed guards whose loyalty belonged to Dreg. Alaric rejected each measure, but every rejection exhausted him. The curse fed on strain. When anger rose in him, the black lines darkened. When Mara stepped close and placed her palm over his wrist, they faded. The gesture became routine, then dangerous in another way. Because one evening, after a long council session, Alaric covered her hand with his and did not immediately let go. "I'm sorry," he said, "for needing you." Mara looked at their joined hands. Need is not the same as taking. It can become taking if no one stops it. Then stop it. His eyes lifted to hers. "I'm trying." There was nothing romantic in the room, no music, no moonlit balcony, only a tired king and a rejected girl surrounded by documents and fear. Yet Mara felt something shift. Not love, not yet. Something rarer in palaces, the sense of being seen without being measured. The reversal came on the 7th night, when Mara learned the curse was not returning because she was weak. It was returning because someone was feeding it. She had gone to the archive with Master Rivon, keeping within the measured distance, while Alaric rested in a wheeled chair at the doorway. They searched coronation records for any mention of a binding crown. Mara was better with old ledgers than any noble expected, and she noticed what the archivists had missed or feared to mark. For 20 years, the treasury had purchased black salt, grave myrrh, and star iron filings every new moon. The supplies were listed as preservation materials for the sealed throne room, but Mara had cleaned that room. None of those things had been used there. "What are they for?" she asked. Master Ivan's face went pale. Alaric reached for the ledger. His fingers shook as he read the signatures. Lady Isolde, Councillor Dreg, 3 others from the original regency. Not preserving the throne, preserving the curse. A sound escaped him, too controlled to be a laugh, and too bitter to be anything else. "They did not fail to wake me." Mara understood before he said it. "They chose not to." Master Ivan closed the archive door. "Majesty, we must be careful. If the council suspects you know, they will move quickly." Alaric's expression changed. For the first time since waking, Mara saw the king from the tapestries, not bright and laughing, but strategic beneath the exhaustion. "Then we let them believe I am still weak." Mara should have felt relieved that he had a plan. Instead, she felt cold. "And what am I in that plan?" He turned to her immediately. "Not bait, unless you choose it. Not a key. Not a sacrifice. I will not survive my prison by building one around you." Master Ivan looked between them. The old physician's voice softened. "There may be a way to test the council's hand without endangering Mistress Vey beyond what she agrees to. The curse responds to distance, but perhaps not to her body alone. It may respond to choice." Mara frowned. "Choice?" "The crown woke when she touched it to prevent harm," Ivan said. "Not when guards dusted near it. not when priests prayed over it. Her act was voluntary, compassionate. The old magic may be older than the curse placed upon it. That idea followed Mara back through the corridors. Choice, compassion, voluntary. Words no counselor used when discussing her future. If the crown needed her because she cared, then binding her by force might destroy the very thing keeping Alaric awake. Or worse, it might turn her care into a chain. That night, Dreg made his move. He did not storm the chamber. Men like him rarely needed to. He sent Lady Selene first, dressed in silver, carrying a formal gown and a smile sharp enough to cut thread. "The council has prepared a ceremony," Selene said. "A blessing of gratitude. You will wear this." Mara touched the gown. It was beautiful. Too beautiful. The collar was sewn with tiny star iron beads. Cold pricked her fingertips. "No." Selene's smile faltered. "No? I will not wear it." "You forget yourself," Mara almost laughed. "Everyone keeps saying that. Yet every time I remember myself, it troubles you." Selene stepped closer. "Listen to me, Mara. You think the king's attention makes you untouchable. It does not. You are a village orphan standing in a room full of bloodlines older than your name. If you are wise, you will accept honor when it is offered." Alaric, resting near the window, spoke without turning. "If it is honor, Lady Selene, why does the collar contain binding metal?" Silence struck the room. Selene's eyes darted to the door. Too late. Master Yvain and the scarred guard from Mara's first night entered from the side passage. The guard's name was Captain Roan, and he had once served Alaric before the curse. In his hands was the ledger from the archive, not for public display, not for a dramatic trial, for the few loyal people who still knew the difference between law and theater. Selene lifted her chin. "You misunderstand court garments now," Mara said. "No, I understand them better than I did a week ago." Alaric rose. It cost him. Mara saw the curse stir and stepped within reach, but did not touch until he nodded. Consent, even in crisis. She placed her hand near his wrist. The darkness faded. He looked at Selene with the weary grief of a man seeing 20 years of stolen life in one young woman's ambition. "Tell Sorin the ceremony will proceed," he said. Selene's relief flashed too quickly. "Majesty, tell him I will attend. Tell him Mara will wear what he prepared." Mara's hand tightened. Alaric looked at her, not commanding, asking. She understood then. A trap, but one that required her agreement. Selene left, and the room seemed to hold its breath. "No," Alaric said before Mara could speak. "If you refuse, that is the end of it. We find another way." "Do you have another way?" He did not lie. "Not yet." Mara looked at the gown, at the cold star iron sewn where a collar would close around her throat. Fear moved through her, clean and reasonable. She had spent her life being placed where others wanted her. Ward, fiancé, servant, key. Now the first real choice offered to her was dangerous. But it was still a choice. "If I do this," she said, "I decide when to stop." "Yes. If I say leave, you let me leave." Pain crossed his face, but he answered, "Yes." "And if the curse takes you?" "Then it takes me as a king, not as your jailer." That was the moment Mara chose, not because she loved him enough to die for him, not because prophecy demanded it. She chose because men like Dreg counted on frightened people staying silent, and Mara was tired of being useful only in ways that served cowards. The ceremony took place in the old chapel, not the court hall. That mattered. Dreg had expected a controlled ritual with selected witnesses, not a public spectacle. He wanted the binding done quietly before anyone could object. Marble saints watched from shadowed alcoves. Candles burned with greenish flames from the black salt hidden beneath their wax. 5 counselors stood near the altar. Lady Isolde held a silver bowl. Julian Vale lingered at the back, pale and eager, still hoping to attach himself to whichever side won. Mara entered wearing the gown, but Master Ivan had removed 3 stitches from the collar and replaced the star iron clasp with painted tin. The true binding beads rested in a pouch at Alaric's belt. Captain Roan and 6 old royal guards waited behind the chapel screens. It was not a rebellion. Not yet. It was a test of who would reach for a chain when they thought no one could stop them. Drag welcomed Mara with warmth, so false it felt colder than hatred. My dear child, tonight the kingdom thanks you. By this blessing, your gift will be secured for all Ravengard. Gift? Mara asked. Her voice carried softly. A gift can be refused. Drag's eyes hardened for a fraction. Not when refusal costs lives. Alaric stood beside her, one hand on the altar, breathing through pain. Then it is not gratitude, it is extortion. The counselor turned to him with practiced sorrow. Majesty, you are newly woken. Emotion clouds you. For 20 years we bore the burden of rule while you suffered. We know what must be done. Yes, Alaric said. I believe you do. He set the pouch on the altar. The real star iron beads spilled out, black and bright in the candlelight. Lady Isolde inhaled sharply. Drag went still. Mara saw the calculation race through him. Deny, deflect, command. But before he chose, Alaric lifted the old ledger. You bought the ingredients every new moon. You renewed the crown's wound while telling the kingdom you preserved me. You ruled through my sleeping body because a living king could dismiss you. It could have become a public accusation. It did not. There were no cheering crowds, no stunned nobles filling a hall, only a chapel full of conspirators, a handful of loyal witnesses, and Mara standing close enough to feel the king tremble. The intimacy made it more frightening. Drag's mask fell by inches. You were going to ruin the kingdom, he said. You were young, reckless, ready to return power to provincial assemblies, to tax the war fortunes, to forgive border families who had backed the wrong banners. We saved Ravengard from your ideals. You saved your chairs, Alaric said, and now you would bind her to finish what you began. Drag looked at Mara then, truly looked, and she saw that he hated her, not because she was lowborn, but because she had interrupted a machine that had run smoothly for 20 years. Child, step away from him. You have no idea what he was. Kings are not men. They are storms wearing crowns. We made him useful. We can make you useful too. Julian moved at the back. Mara, perhaps we should listen. There may be terms. She turned just enough to see him. Still searching for the winning side? He flushed and fell silent. The curse surged suddenly. Whether from the hidden black salt or Alaric's anger, Mara did not know. Dark lines climbed his throat. He staggered. Drag's face lit with triumph. You see? Without binding, he falls. Put the collar on her, and the kingdom lives. For one terrible second, everyone looked at Mara, even Alaric, though his eyes held apology instead of demand. The old pattern opened before her like a familiar door. Be useful. Be quiet. Be grateful. Give up one more piece of yourself and call it duty. Mara picked up the crown from its velvet cushion, gasps circled the chapel. The metal burned cold in her hands. The curse inside it recognized fear and leaned toward her. But beneath that, she felt the other magic Master Wyvern had guessed at, older and steadier, like roots under a ruined house. Choice. Compassion. Not obedience. She stepped away from Alaric. The black veins spread over his jaw. He made a sound of pain but didn't tell her to stop. That silence became the greatest trust he could offer. Mara walked to the altar bowl where Lady Isolde had prepared binding water. Instead of placing the crown on Alaric's head or kneeling for the collar, Mara lowered the crown into the bowl. The water turned black. The chapel candles guttered. Drag lunged, but Captain Roan emerged from behind the screen and caught his arm. Not violently. Firmly enough. Mara kept both hands on the crown and spoke the words that rose in her mind, not from a spell book, but from every room where she had been told she had no right to choose. I give care freely. I withdraw it from chains. I will not be made a lock. The crown cracked, not loudly. It sounded like ice giving way under spring sunlight. Alaric collapsed to one knee. Mara almost ran to him, but instinct told her the work was not done. She lifted the broken crown from the bowl. The dark stone at its center had split, revealing a clear ember of gold inside. The curse poured out in a shadowy coil, searching for the old path back into the king. It struck the empty collar instead. The star iron beads flared. Dreg screamed, not in agony, but in rage and terror, as the magic he had prepared to bind, Mara sealed itself around the conspirators' wrists like bands of dull light. Master Ivorn shouted for the black salt candles to be smothered. Guards moved. Lady Isolde dropped to the floor, sobbing that she had only followed necessity. Dreg stared at Mara with pure disbelief. He had planned for power, fear, ambition, even sacrifice. He had not planned for a girl who would refuse both rescue and surrender long enough to make the curse choose its true makers. Alaric's breathing steadied. The black veins faded, not completely, but farther than they ever had. Mara ran to him then. This time she touched his face without asking, because he was falling, and because he leaned into her hand like a man returning from a great distance. "You left," he whispered, voice rough. I stepped away," she said. "There is a difference." His laugh broke into something like grief. "Yes, there is." The aftermath did not arrive as a parade. It arrived as locked doors, sealed letters, and quiet decisions made before dawn. Alaric refused to turn the chapel into a spectacle. The kingdom would learn the truth, but not through a mob's hunger. First, the remaining loyal ministers had to secure the treasury, the guard posts, and the border dispatches. Dreg, Isolde, and the 3 original conspirators were confined in the East Tower under royal guard, their own binding spell preventing them from issuing commands. Julian Vale was not imprisoned. That would have been too simple and too generous. Alaric stripped House Vale of its false claim over Mara's person and ordered an audit of its estates. Julian was sent home with no fiancé, no royal favor, and a ledger trail Mara had prepared herself. Sometimes justice is not a dramatic downfall. Sometimes it is a coward being left alone with accounts he cannot charm. Mara slept for 12 hours after the chapel, not in a chair beside the king's bed, but in her own locked room with the key on her side. When she woke, there were no guards inside, no ladies waiting to dress her, no star iron gown. There was only breakfast, her mother's silver pin polished and set beside the tray, and a note in Alaric's uneven handwriting. It said, "You owe me nothing. When you are ready, I will explain what freedom can look like from here." She read it 3 times. The words frightened her more than the curse had. Obligation was familiar. Freedom was a room without walls, and Mara had lived too long measuring herself by where others placed her. She found Alaric in the small garden behind the old chapel. He walked slowly with a cane. Without the full crown, he looked less like a legend and more like a man recovering from a long illness. A narrow band of gold, made from the clear ember inside the broken stone, rested on a table nearby. Not a crown. Not yet. Perhaps not ever in the old way. "Master Ivan says the curse is wounded, not gone," Alaric said as she approached. "It may take months to cleanse what remains. Years, perhaps. But it no longer requires your nearness to keep me awake." Mara stopped. The air between them changed. For days, distance had been dangerous. Now, distance was possible. He continued before she could speak. "The council wanted to make you a sacred attendant. The priests have already begun inventing titles. Crown touched, wake in hand, blessed key. I have forbidden all of them." That startled a laugh from her. "Blessed key is especially awful." "I thought so." He smiled, then grew serious. "I can arrange safe passage anywhere in the kingdom, or beyond it. Money enough to begin again, if you accept it as restitution, not purchase. A place at the Royal Academy, if you wish to study law, or accounts formally. A post in the treasury, under your own name. Or nothing at all from me, if that is what freedom requires." Mara looked toward the chapel windows, where sunlight made the glass saints glow. Part of her had expected a plea. "Stay because I need you. Stay because fate chose you. Stay because the kingdom will call you selfish if you go." Instead, he offered doors. That made the one she wanted harder to name. "And if I stay near the palace?" she asked. He held himself very still. "Then it should be because you choose work worth doing, not because I am afraid to wake without you." "Are you?" His honesty came slowly. "Yes." There it was. Not a command, not a chain. A truth placed in her hands without closing her fingers around it. "I'm afraid, too," Mara said, "of being useful again, of mistaking gratitude for affection, of waking one day and finding everyone has built a nicer cage and called it honor." "Then let me be the first wall you test," Alaric said. "Tell me no. Leave a room. Disagree in council. Refuse dinner. If I fail, go. If the palace fails, I will open the gates myself." Mara studied him. The king who had begged her not to leave was still there. But so was the man who had let her step away in the chapel even as the curse climbed his throat. That mattered. Love, if it ever came, could not grow from rescue alone. It needed proof that freedom would survive closeness. In the weeks that followed, Mara did not become queen, saint, or prisoner. She became something the court found far more unsettling: an official royal examiner with authority over regency accounts. Alaric gave her the post in writing. Mara made him rewrite the first version, because it sounded too much like a favor. The second named her qualifications. She liked that better. The court struggled. Some nobles bowed because they feared the king. Others because they feared the ledgers. A few, over time, because they learned Mara could be fair even when she had every reason not to be. She uncovered stolen grain reserves, false war pensions, and taxes collected for roads never built. She did not enjoy ruining people. She enjoyed returning what had been taken. There is a difference, and Mara understood it deeply. Alaric regained strength slowly. Some days he was sharp and commanding. Other days, pain bent him into silence. He hated being seen weak, and Mara hated being expected to soothe him. They argued. Their first real argument happened over a village petition he dismissed too quickly because the name reminded him of a battlefield loss. Mara told him grief was not a policy. He told her she did not understand war. She told him he was right. She understood aftermath, which lasted longer. He apologized before sunset, not grandly, specifically. That, too, mattered. The broken crown was kept in the garden chapel, sealed beneath clear glass. People came to look at it, but no one was allowed to kneel. Alaric said Ravengard had knelt to crowns long enough. On the first anniversary of his waking, the palace held no lavish ball. Mara insisted on a public day of petitions instead, and Alaric groaned that she had a cruel sense of celebration. She told him paperwork was good for humility. He told her humility was beginning to feel suspiciously like punishment. By then, his smile came easier. By then, when he reached for her hand, he waited. Sometimes she gave it. Sometimes she did not. Both answers were allowed to remain true. That evening, after the last petitioner left, Alaric found Mara in the sealed throne room. It was no longer sealed. Sunlight entered freely. The black throne had been removed, replaced by a long table where ministers now had to sit facing one another instead of hiding behind the sleeping authority of a king. Mara stood beneath the tapestry of young Alaric, laughing on horseback. "I used to think this room was where my life ended," she said. "So did I," he answered. She looked at him then. The year had changed him. Strength had returned, but so had humility, and the combination sat better on him than the crown ever had. He held a small box, but when Mara raised an eyebrow, he shook his head quickly. Not that kind of box. Wise. He opened it. Inside was her mother's silver pin, repaired with a thin line of gold through the crack Mara had never noticed until it was mended. "You left it in the chapel after the binding," he said. "I should have returned it sooner, but the goldsmith needed time." Mara took it carefully. "Why gold?" "Because broken things should not have to pretend they were never broken." The words found a quiet place in her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Alaric said, "I am leaving for the Northern Circuit in 3 days. The border assemblies need to see that I am awake and listening. I want you to come as royal examiner, not as a symbol, not as my cure. The work is yours if you want it." Mara fastened the pin at her throat. "And if I say no?" His smile was small and sad and proud. "Then I will complain privately and leave anyway." She laughed. The sound surprised them both, filling the room that had once held only dust and fear. "Then yes," she said, "I will come for the work." He nodded. "Good." She stepped closer. Not because the curse pulled her, not because the court watched, not because anyone needed proof. She stepped closer because she wanted to. "And perhaps," she added, "for the company." Alaric's breath caught with the same vulnerability he had shown the night he woke, but this time he did not beg. He simply offered his hand, palm open. Mara placed hers in it. Outside, the palace bells rang the hour, ordinary and bright. No curse answered, no crown demanded. The kingdom did not heal in a single day, and neither did they. But the girl who had been rejected before a laughing court had touched the cursed crown and discovered the truth hidden beneath 20 years of fear. Power can sleep, crowns can lie, councils can call captivity duty, but a choice freely given is stronger than any chain made to imitate it. So here is my question for you. Was Mara right to stay and rebuild the kingdom from a place of freedom? Or should she have left Ravengard behind after everything it did to her? Tell me in the comments, because I think this is one of those endings where the answer reveals what kind of scars we understand best. And if this story kept you watching, subscribe for more emotional long-form tales. Leave a like for Mara's courage. And remember this: the people who reject you when they think you are powerless may be the same people begging for your hand when they realize your worth. But by then, the choice is no longer theirs.